Take Back Your Health Now, Episode 29.
You're listening to the Take Back Your Health Now podcast, the show that interviews the top doctors, athletes, trainers, and entrepreneurs to help you find the Holy Grail of health. Now here's your host, Dr. Dan Margolin.
Hi, this is Dr. Dan Margolin with another segment of Take Back Your Health Now, where we pull out all the stops in search of health's Holy Grail. We are very excited to have Dr. Robert Weil, D.P.M, on our show. He specializes in podiatric medicine, orthotics, and sports medicine. He's written a column for the Naperville Sun and Aurora Beacon since 2007 as the sports doctor. His goal is to provide sports medicine information to athletes, their families, coaches, and all readers. Additionally, Dr. Weil hosts a weekly radio show, The Sports Doctor, on healthylife.net. He addresses current topics in medicine and sports and often includes guest speakers who bring a wealth of knowledge from their various professional backgrounds. Dr. Weil, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Dr. Dan, it's nice to be with you. We traded radio shows. We had Dr. Dan on The Sports Doctor a few weeks ago. I'm returning the favor. It's good to be with you. Congratulations on your podcast.
Well, thank you so much. And it was really, really fun having you on the show. We met, what did we meet, about a year ago in New York City at that summit? And we sort of hit it off?
Yes, I have been taking part the past 3 years in the National Publicity Summit, representing my radio show, where media from all over the country comes in, gives individuals. At that time, you were promoting your book.
That's right.
So you were one of the guys who speed dated me. So it was great to have your acquaintance and then to finally get you on the Sports Doc.
Well, it was great being on there. So, Dr. Weil, you are a podiatrist, and let's just go back a little bit. What drew you into becoming a podiatrist?
Years ago, I was interested in some aspect of the medical field. Dentistry was one of my interests. It was always great to tell girlfriends' parents that I was thinking of going to dental school. It was really impressed them years ago. And then podiatry came along. I wasn't that familiar with it at all, but I liked the idea that it wasn't life and death situations. There were various areas, whether it was pediatrics, whether it was geriatrics, that you could get involved in surgically. About 6-7 years after I got involved in practice, I met a very famous sports therapist, kinesiotherapist by the name of Bob Gaida. Bob was an ex-Mr. America, Mr. Universe in the 60s. He went on to become an individual that people from all over the country, the John McEnroes, the 85 Super Bowl Bears, the Walter Paytons came to see, to rehab or to be a step quicker. Back in those days, high performance, most athletes didn't know how to spell it. And I was Bob's consulting podiatrist. So with my fingers crossed, I started getting an opportunity to put orthotics in the shoes of some of these superstars. And it was very exciting to get that opportunity.
Wow. What's it like working with these kind of elite athletes? I mean, what's that whole experience like?
Well, you gotta be a good sports psychologist, really.
I imagine, right?
Which we feature a lot. I think it's definitely a challenge for various reasons. One being that many great athletes are surrounded by all sorts of influences. I've been to this doctor, I've been to that doctor, I've been to the team doctor, I've been talking to this therapist. So sometimes it's difficult. He might take your orthotics and throw them out the window if he doesn't feel comfortable in the first day or two that he's using them. So there definitely was, at the same time, being a sports fan myself, it was very exciting to be around. We got very involved in the world of baseball, football, but one of the things that was very exciting, in the late 70s, I met a famous figure skating coach, Candy Brown. We just did an article on Candy called "She Started It All." We have a great newsletter called Hyperscore Performance Figure Skating, and Candy introduced me to the world of figure skating. And I've been putting orthotics in figure skates, Dr. Dan, for probably 3.5, 4 decades. And the highlight of that career was one of the young boys who grew up here in Naperville, Illinois, where I've been transplanted from New York all these years. Evan Lysacek was 10 years old when I put orthotics in his skates. 15 years later, he was the Olympic gold medalist in
Wow.
2010 in Vancouver. So I had the opportunity to show a lot of the medical world the value of podiatry being included in the whole sports criteria, and the value also of proper foot and leg and body positioning, which orthotics really brings to the table. So it was very exciting. One of my specialties is the high performance young boy or girl, whether they're a soccer player or whether they are a figure skater, whether they're a dancer, etc. And in the area of the pressure on some of these young kids and the overuse injuries and all of these problems that we see, and podiatry is in the middle. A lot of it, all day. I'm sure you sing the song, the foot bone's connected to the ankle bone's connected to the knee bone, right?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I sing it all day long. Absolutely.
Right.
Well, Dr. Weil, some of the people listening may not be completely familiar with what an orthotic is. So just describe to them what that is and how that helps.
Great question, because we're surrounded by all sorts of myths regarding arch supports and foot supports. So the properly done, the job of orthotics really, and it's a insert that goes in shoes, might go in skates or skis, might go in grandma's shoes. But ideally, orthotics are designed to properly position the foot and ankle and lower leg so that everything works more efficiently. The feet affect everything. They're our foundation. So many times, if you watch the Dr. Scholl's commercial on TV, you see the fireman or the policeman saying, gee, my back and my knees and my legs, and he's talking about orthotics. But usually we see, of course, we're prejudiced, but the profession that really is on top of the area of biomechanics, the way our muscles and joints and tendons work together, is podiatry. And the ability, again, of using orthotics for proper support, proper positioning of the foot. There's a big difference between the position of the foot and leg when we land on the heel. Every time we take a walk, when we land on our heel, we're generating about half our weight up our feet, ankles, legs, hips, and spine.
That's right.
You start running and jumping, you could triple that. If you're one of my figure skaters doing a triple jump, you're hitting the ice with 7-8 times your weight. You better be in alignment.
Is that how much they're hitting it with when they're doing those jumps? Wow.
It's amazing that anybody survives. And one of the big challenges, of course, is I call them the prodigy sports, where again you have young children, and it's one of the most popular articles on my website, which is sportsdoctorradio.com, Dr. Dan. And the name of the article is Young Athletes, One Sport or Many? Good question. And it talks about the world of specialization, where you might have in your office a young tennis player who might be 10, 11, 12 years old, and they're playing 10 days a week already.
Right.
And they're really pushing the envelope regarding stress on the growing body. And I think, again, that the podiatrist, we just wrote an article on called Kids and Cleats, where we're talking about the millions of young soccer players. What's one of the most common things we see in podiatry with children is heel pain.
Yeah, absolutely. Apophysitis or growing pain.
Exactly. The big growth center on the back of the heel. So what does soccer do? They put a cluster of cleats right underneath the heel routinely.
That's right.
It's just part of the tradition, so to speak. So in many instances, we're again talking about you want to be in the right shoe for your particular foot type. You want to be in the right shoe for a particular sport you might be playing. And it's hard to beat the advice of podiatry when it comes to those aspects.
Well, Dr. Weil, let's talk, going back to orthotics in that same realm, right? So normally when we make an orthotic for Joe Schmo that comes off the street. It's pretty straightforward, right? You take a plaster cast or you use a scanner. But when you're making these orthotics, these inserts for these elite ice skaters, how does the process differ from just making it for somebody that's not involved in these kind of sports?
Well, again, one of the big challenges of any type of insert or orthotic device is it's got to be comfortable. If it's not comfortable, we're in trouble. Now, in a figure skate, where we might be talking about a orthotic that's got to be as narrow as one might be for a dress shoe,
Right.
with a woman.
How do you do that? Absolutely.
Well, again, we got to be aware of the skate that the orthotic's going in so that it fits and that it fits properly. We got to make sure that the device is minimum bulk enough so that it doesn't take up too much room and cause that individual to be uncomfortable. Ironically, it's no different if we're putting the orthotic in grandma's shoes or in whoever we happen to be dealing with. Many times we see construction workers or we see people who are doing physical jobs, and I consider them athletic. The guy's climbing a ladder, he's jumping down off and up and down off platforms or in and out of a truck, et cetera, et cetera. So the orthotics got to be comfortable, but I think we need to be using, I like very flexible plastics that are virtually unbreakable and that can be moved from most of the kids that we put orthotics in skates. We'll be able to take them out of their skates and put them in their shoes so that they can switch them back and forth. But the real criteria, again, is making sure that we're not taking up too much room in that skate, shoe, or ski, or whatever, for that individual to be uncomfortable, and that also we are not selling somebody an orthotic, hey, see you around. Follow-up is very important. I see some of these individuals for a decade or two later in one regard or another, where we're really following up and making sure that they're comfortable and that we are achieving what we want to achieve. And I think what's very interesting also, Dr. Dan, is almost all the time we're using orthotics, my experience, it's because something hurts. My heel hurts, my arch hurts, my ankles bother me, shin splints, knee problems. Half the females I see who are active as a podiatrist are knee problems. Again, because of the relationship of the foot to the lower leg. I really believe that any persistent, ongoing lower extremity problem, back, hips, knees, if it's ongoing and persistent, it's related to foot mechanics. Might not be directly caused by them, but in some way, shape, or form is related. So if I'm putting orthotics in your skates or shoes or your son or daughter's skates or shoes tomorrow, number one, we're making sure that we are getting used to these things kind of gradually. We're not putting them in our skates and doing triple jumps or double jumps the first day we've got them. And I might be seeing that individual in a couple of weeks. Hi, Dan, how are you? You comfortable? Do they feel good? Are they fitting well?
Right, you're
Things
making
are going
adjustments
well.
and things like that. Sure.
Exactly. We might look. But what's interesting, and again, I'm prejudiced, where I've never had a skating coach in 35 years call me up and say, Dr. Weil, you made them slower. You messed up their balance.
Right.
So
right.
enhancing performance, step quicker, better balance, better alignment, better agility is one of the exciting new frontiers in again, I say properly done orthotics. And I'm sure you've got an office filled of recreational and semi-serious people. They might be runners, they might be golfers, and probably every one of them says, everything works better when I've got orthotics in my shoes. And I think that's one of the new frontiers. You don't need something wrong to benefit. And that's one of the things I tell parents or athletes all the time when they'll say, Dr. Dan, Dr. Bob, does my son and daughter need orthotics? And I say, I have a better word for you. And that's, would they benefit?
Right, right.
And I found it very positive. And I'm now old enough, really, that I have seen, I have skating coaches. As a matter of fact, when I wrote the article about Candy Brown, who I met in the late 70s, we take her skate boots off, and the orthotics say 1979 on them. Right.
1979. Wow. Wow.
Right. These guys are plastics, and no wonder I can't make any money. These things, they don't wear out.
Wow.
But
Even
at
with
the same
athletes,
time,
wow, that's
right, I've watched children grow up in them in various sports, and I found tremendous success. And again, speaking of knee problems and the plague of ACL injuries that
right.
we see in sports, and probably 4 or 5 to 1 in girls and females, wider hips, a different mechanical alignment to the knee, hormonal differences. I can count on one hand how many athlete girls I've seen who had orthotics in their shoes have a a physical injury, ACL injury, changing direction, running hard, a non-traumatic situation. And I think that's, again, another one of the secrets that many times we see, which is the attacking these knee concerns with a proper foot alignment. And I do add, absolutely, when we're using orthotics in these kids, the importance of foot ankle strengthening
Right.
and balance exercises. You walk into the gym of a school or even the gym of a competitive team, and everybody's worrying about how much they could bench press, but who's strengthening their feet and ankles?
You're right. Had the supportive structure, the thing that's really like allowing you to compete. I think one of the things you said was true. Like, we're getting people out of pain, but I think the other thing that we're actually also increasing that might not be so easy to measure is the longevity of that athlete.
Exactly. And again, on the Sports Doctor, and again, you talk about the name of your show and some of the different areas regarding health and wellness and fitness. And this is something that we specialized in all of these years on the Sports Doctor, whether I have expertise. We talk a lot about the mental game, the psychology, whether it's of parents. We're all familiar with the overzealous sideline Little League dad,
Sure.
guy ranting and raving. We talk a lot of nutrition. We talk an awful lot about senior wellness, again, regarding activity. I've spent the past 10, 12 years talking about with experts around the world on concussions. So even though the theme running through the Sports Doctor, again, involves the role of the foot in many instances, then similar to your attention, we talk a lot about wellness, fitness, and I know, as a matter of fact, if you go to my website, sportsdoctorradio.com, go to radio shows, and you'll see in the last month, you'll be able to read about when Dr. Dan was on, and we really talked about your success and your practice and your podcast.
Well, I love your show because you really cover such a wide array of subjects, and it all relates to health. It all relates to this area, but you're capturing it from so many different angles. It's fascinating. It's actually a joy to find somebody that's in the same profession. When you're talking and you're saying that you were going to be a dentist at first, I was going to be a dentist at first, and I mean it's almost as if we had sort of had the same background growing up.
Yeah, I think I messed up the chalk test. Well, you're on the East Coast, aren't you? Aren't you in Jersey?
We're in New Jersey, yes, sir.
Yeah, I still have relatives in New Jersey, and I do though practice my New York accent at least once a week on the radio, Dr. Dan. So I don't want to lose the twang. You know what I mean?
I do. So, but just going to your point before, I'd say I had a patient come in. And he was a young guy in his early 40s that had a hip replacement and was going for another hip replacement. And when I looked at his history, he had plantar fasciitis about 15 years prior. Okay. And I said, well, how did you have it treated? And he said he had cortisone injections. And I said, what about orthotics? And he had gone to 3 different podiatrists. Okay. I really analyzed. And I said, well, did they offer you orthotics? He did not even know what orthotics were.
Doesn't shock me. Again, our profession has really turned to reconstructive surgery, and everybody's a surgeon, and everybody's looking to do surgery. But one of the questions I would ask, of course, if we've got some, whether people are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, or older, and they've got arthritis in the knees or the hips have worn out and we've got replacement of joints. What do you think caused that kind of wear and tear on the joints over the years? And almost always, the malalignment kinds of factors that we're talking about are involved. So I hope those kinds of incidences where podiatry, again, biomechanics has always been a real big topic in podiatry and the role of orthotics, but it's been overshadowed in some regard over the past few decades with the explosion of the podiatric surgeon, and there's some tremendous expertise in podiatric surgery. There's no doubt about it, but I think a little bit into the background has been either the reluctance of podiatry to get up front and personal, whether it's with physical therapy, with the orthopedic community, with all of the chiropractic community, and be able to get them to understand that if properly done, orthotic therapy, as I like to call it rather, is almost without exception a step up. Even if you're talking about preventing of problems, and even though we don't have a time machine to be able to say, well, let's take a look at this guy 10, 15 years ago and see how his knees would have been if we never interceded. But clinically, I'm sure your experience is the same, that there aren't many people, if any, if an orthotic is comfortable, that don't find that, gee, doc, my back feels a lot better, and gee, my knees feel better. And one of the challenges we have in sports medicine is that if the feet don't hurt, then often medicine will miss it. I've had people who've had knee surgery when a ball of yarn put under the arch might have been helpful. It's ridiculous. So, but I think there's been tremendous improvement and progress made. There's not a team around professionally in any sport where you don't see podiatry involved in some way, shape, or form, and I think that's great to see.
And I definitely think you had a big hand in that. But when I look at patients and I train doctors, I always say, listen, I look at my job as two jobs. One is to get you out of pain, and two is to keep you out of pain. And the get you out of pain might be cortisone, it might be some kind of acute thing, but almost always the keep you out of pain is the orthotic, is that realignment of the joints, is that recognition of using a real shock absorber so that the foot is actually like the pressure is taken off so it doesn't affect the knee and the back and all these other things.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. Again, the foot ankles, as we know, is a complicated ball and socket type mechanism. There are a few areas of the body that are more sophisticated. We might think our wrist and shoulders can compare in complexity, but you ain't walking on your hands or your shoulders. Although I remember I mentioned that once. I was speaking to a large group of young gymnasts and their parents, and the kids raised their hand. They said, "We walk on our hands all the time, doctor." So I said, I stand corrected. But on other times, we'll see even the suggestion of the proper shoe and the proper shoe type many times can make a tremendous difference. Again, because the first major shock absorber that you just mentioned of our whole body are our feet and ankles. And once you start running and jumping, once you start changing direction, then all of a sudden we start to see how important the foot ankle is. And for years, it's been out of sight, out of mind. If we want to be in a good looking shoe with nice colors, but whether or not it's got the proper support, et cetera, sometimes a different story. And usually that's the best combination, which is having somebody who's fit properly. I had shoe experts. One of my sponsors, Dr. Dan, locally is New Balance, sure. One of the popular brands of walking and running shoes and sports shoes with width sizing. And their expertise, many had said to me, they said that even with serious athletes, over 75% of us aren't even fit properly when it comes to shoes. And I found that amazing, that stat was even close.
Yeah. No, it is amazing. Like, and the question I'll ask you after this is also like, how have you seen over the years shoes change in terms of, their style, their construction, the support?
I think they've come a long way, baby. Although I'm not a fan of less is better. We've seen, I call them the hula hoop trends over the years, where all of a sudden you had barefoot running and you had minimalist shoes, lighter, lighter,
Right,
lighter, less and
right.
less and less. We saw that challenge even in figure skating because the Russians were using these light boots. And all of a sudden here, was something that, hey, the Russians are doing it. We want to copy it. The question was whether you had the same structural integrity. And I remember 25 years ago, roughly, one of our colleagues, Peter Kavanaugh from Penn State University, wrote a book, Choosing the Best Shoe. And the front cover was a collage of about 50 brands or something like that. And his
Wow.
point was, there is no exact best shoe. But for the most part, I think they've made great improvements in materials, in structure, and stability. But what's interesting is all those years ago, when you would ask individuals, how long would my running shoes, for example, be good for before I should change them? It's always
Right.
a popular question.
Yeah, it's a great
And then
question.
one of the common answers was, 400 or 500 miles, maybe something like that. And then depending on the climate, if you're in Chicago or New Jersey and you're running outside in the winter, whatever, the wear and tear is going to make a difference. But even today, if you ask, how many miles does the top shoes really last? And the answer is, 400 or 500 miles. So
Huh.
durability, I don't think has changed very much over the
Interesting.
years. Has that been your impression?
Almost exactly the same thing. Yeah. I mean, I've seen what I've seen with shoes is, and I think it is related to podiatry, that they become much more supportive, at least for a time period. And I just want to say, I had Achilles tendonitis, so I wear orthotics myself. And when we met at that summit, I left my orthotics in my shoes in my hotel room in New York City and went back. I actually did, and I forgot about them. And 3 weeks later, I'm walking around the office, and my Achilles tendonitis flared up again. So I'm actually like a living testimony to orthotics. But I spoke with some athletes over the years, some of them that are the minimalist runners. They basically run in socks. And I decided to try it. I actually did decide to try it. And for me, it didn't work. It really was. I needed the orthotic. I needed the support. And
Yes, a lot of times we'll see that if an individual, if a runner says, I've never had problems. We've always recommended in athletes, whatever their sport was, if you wanted to do a little barefoot running on the beach, if you wanted to work on sand where you could really work those feet and exercise those feet, if you wanted to run on a golf course where you could really be confident that the surface was safe, we didn't make a big deal. I thought it was a good mixture. As
right.
far as jogging was concerned, with the sameness of the same kind of pounding, if a runner would say, hey, listen, I've never had problems and I'm doing well in a real light shoe, we would make a big deal out of it. But a lot of it's been hype, like new cars, where the shoe industry is constantly changing. The book came out, The Natural Runner or whatever the name of it was, and all of a sudden this new trend started. But I think many of our colleagues in podiatry and sports medicine have seen that things like stress fractures and plantar fasciitis and Achilles tendonitis, if anything, have probably increased as individuals who should not be without the proper support of, at the very least, a good shoe, wouldn't do well. And there definitely is an area of over-the-counter inserts, whether it's Dr. Scholl's or Superfeed or Spenco, many times are helpful,
Hmm.
and where an arch support over the counter somebody could try can be helpful, but that is not. It is not a custom orthotic, which is really about putting the joints of your feet and ankles and lower leg in their best position. It's a different animal.
I might have to play this in my office because that's one of the most common things
Right.
that I hear patients say. Let me ask you, here's a little bit of an uncomfortable question for patients, and I'm just wondering what you see with your own patients. But how does weight and maybe recent gains in weight play into plantar fasciitis, foot pain, things like that?
Well, it's interesting. I've spent about 12 years on the radio and the world of childhood obesity. I have a feature article from Podiatry Management. People go to my website, sportsdoctorradio.com. They could read. It's called Childhood Obesity in Podiatry. Extra weight doesn't help anything. And sometimes we'll see, especially if it's a lot of weight that's extra, whether it's a child or an adult, is going to put extra stress. It's just common sense on our feet, ankles, and lower legs. And one of the challenges with children especially has been if a young boy or girl is overweight and their feet are bothering them, but they're being pushed, you got to lose weight, let's get you out doing exercise, like the Biggest Loser, that kind of insanity,
right.
pushing these individuals, and you get this catch-22, which is, the type of physical activity to have that boy or girl lose weight hurts them,
right,
because they've got foot imbalances. So there's no doubt about it that extra weight puts extra stress on these areas. And, the so-called typical heel arch plantar fasciitis patient over the years has been the overweight individual. There's no doubt it's related.
I find about 20 pounds where somebody has been used to being a certain weight and they jump up about 20 pounds. That to me is about that area where they start to really run into that.
Yes. And I'll tell you what I found effective, Dan, regarding dealing with these kinds of people. Instead of making a big deal out of the weight, I like to include it in the overall approach that we're talking about with that wellness or fitness side of things, which is, Dr. Dan, the extra weight ain't helping you either. Mm-hmm. And to not use it as the main focus, where we might be paying as much attention to your flat feet, as much attention to the fact that you got a horrible diet,
right.
as much attention to the fact that your shoes are worn out, to attention regarding the extra weight. And I found that seems to take some of the intense pressure off, because people already are so self-conscious regarding some of those things. And make no mistake about it, the results and consequences of obesity are a nightmare. We're dealing with an explosion, as you know, in diabetes.
Yep.
Where podiatry with the wound care, who ever heard of wound care?
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago. Now it's the biggest deal, and the trying to prevent amputations. I mean, heck, we had in medicine change the title of the type 2 diabetes from childhood diabetes, because all of a sudden we were seeing these kids. I saw a recent study which showed that the overweight child, besides the bullying, besides the self-esteem and the foot or ankle pain, is about 3 to 5 times more expensive to take care of, because of the developing high blood pressure, the cardiovascular stuff, the diabetes.
I believe
this is why we're in this mess, and it will financially it will break us.
Yes, I think.
Listen, we cannot afford to deal with this. We've got to try to prevent it, and we talk a lot about what's called pull your own weight, which is the idea of a young child who can develop the capability of being able to do an unassisted pull-up, even if it takes them months and months to learn how to do it. They can't be obese, no matter how they're measured. And for all these years, we've been trying to get this stuff to be included in schools routinely, or to get a walking program included in schools.
There used to be a President's Fitness Award when I was a kid, Presidential Fitness Awards. I remember we were all, as kids, we were all fighting to get that presidential.
Yes, and part of it was doing a pull-up.
Yes, that's right.
But it was always very hard to do. Mm-hmm. Hardly anybody. If you take the average first or second grader, you'll find maybe one kid out of 20 is either light enough or strong enough. Yet, if they do what's called leg-assisted pull-ups, imagine a swing set with straps thrown over the top. And imagine those straps came down to the eye height of that young boy or girl. And imagine them maybe twice a week doing 8 repetitions the first week, and 9 the second, and 10 the third, where they would be jumping and pulling at the same time. It's called leg assisted pull-ups. And eventually, if at the same time they're paying attention to diet, at the same time that they're being more active, they might do 8 repetitions twice a week, 9 repetitions. When they would get to 12 repetitions, they would go back to 8, and they would move the straps up an inch. And if people want to read about this, they could go to Pull Your Own Weight, WEIGHT.org, and they could take a look at, because this is about preventing childhood obesity. Once it starts, once we're dealing with it, it's a nightmare, regarding these children. And you know that over 50% of bullying with growing children is overweight related.
I didn't know that.
It's pretty astounding. And again, when we take a look at the whole area of health and wellness, and we're talking about, Jesus, man, 50% of the country is still dealing with obesity. 1/3 of the kids were still dealing with obesity, and diabetes is a routine part of what we're dealing with. Then we're in trouble, and we've got to really be paying attention. So childhood obesity is a big time pet peeve of mine, and we talk about it a lot on the Sports Doctor.
Well, thank you for bringing that to light, Dr. Well, as we wind down, I want to ask you the final question here is, what, we're in search of the Holy Grail of health, if you would. What, from your viewpoint, would you consider to be the Holy Grail of health?
Keep it simple, salesman. The Holy Grail really is keep moving and eat smarter.
Wow.
I think if you can include, you could talk for 3 hours on what eat smarter means. We all know what that means. I think, Dr. Dan, we always knew, and we still know, that junk food and fast food wasn't good for us. I think that's not news. I think what is news is that the so-called standard American diet's poison. I think
that is news. That is news. You are.
That's
right.
news.
That's
news. And it really is. It really, low fat, no fat, sugar, no sugar. So if you could find an activity, the Holy Grail, if you could find an activity that you enjoy, whether it's walking, whether you enjoy jogging, whether you like going to the gym, whether you want to play, whatever it is, something you could stick with it. You could be consistent, and you could pay attention to eating smarter. Then you might get your hands on that Holy Grail if you try hard.
I love it. Dr. Weil, how would people that want more information on you? How would they find out about you, sir?
Again, if they go to my website, Sports Doctor Radio, written out, sportsdoctorradio.com. My show is again, it's called The Sports Doctor. It's live every Wednesday on healthylife.net at 3 to 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we're hot on Twitter. We just passed 30,000 Twitter followers. I get a lot of guests on Twitter in all sorts of areas, and they can follow me. Hopefully you will also at Sports Doc, DOC Radio. And it's been fun to be on with you, Dan, in trade radio shows. Congratulations.
Dr. Weil, thank you so much. You're an awesome guest, and thank you for your contribution to helping people. It's great.
Hey, say hello to New Jersey for me. Thanks a lot, Dr. Dan.
I will, my friend. I will. Thank you.
This episode is sponsored by New Jersey Foot and Ankle Center in Aurora, New Jersey. Remember, when you have a foot problem, you've got a foot doctor in the family. Weekend and evening appointments are available. Call us at 201-261-9445. Once again, that's 201-261-9445. Thanks for listening. Check out the show notes over at drdanspeaks.com. If you're loving the show, head over to iTunes and leave us a review, and we'll catch you next time. Voiceovers for this episode were provided by Randy Ramos Jr. To see and hear more of his work, visit randyramosjr.com.